Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another exciting meeting of the Community Development Block Grant Committee. Roll call, please.
Advisory Member Alec Bagdasarian.
Here.
Advisory Member Gary Cornell.
Present.
Advisory Member Efren Olivares.
Here.
Advisory Member Zari Sinanian.
Here.
And Chair Zari Amarian.
Here. Report of the no longer assistant, acting director regarding the posting of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The agenda for the June 17, 2009 meeting of the CDBG Advisory Committee was posted on Thursday, June 7, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Very good. Minutes. We have some minutes to approve.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of our last meeting on May 13th as submitted by our recording secretary.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Advisory Member Alec Bagdasarian.
I was absent.
Oh, okay. Advisory Member Gary Cornell.
Yes.
Advisory Member Efren Olivares.
Abstain. I was absent.
Advisory Member Zari Sinanian.
Yes.
Chair Zari Amarian.
Yes. Okay. Action item 3A. Mr. Director.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This agenda item is a follow-up to an agenda item on May 13th of the CDBG Advisory Committee meeting, wherein the committee reviewed and approved recommendations for funding CDBG economic stimulus projects. At that meeting, you received a report regarding what was the purpose, what were the guidelines and the priorities and timeframes for the use of the special economic development funds. And at that time, the rules and regulations were still being analyzed by staff and by HUD. HUD was still in the process of conducting training workshops, and staff was also in the process of obtaining potential project proposals from city departments in terms of potential eligible shovel-ready public infrastructure projects. However, at that time, we were interested in the committee's input because we were working under very strict timeframes, and we didn't know if there would be another opportunity to get feedback from the committee on recommendations that the committee members might have with regard to the use of the economic stimulus funds. So based on the information that was available to us, the committee and the staff at the time, the CDBG Advisory Committee made the following funding recommendations for the economic stimulus funds. The committee recommended allocating $88,000 to planning and program management, which is HUD's 10% limit on planning and program management. The committee recommended funding $132,000 for social services, including $98,891 for the Glendale Youth Alliance Youth Employment Program, and $33,109 appropriated to issue an RFP for employment programs to agencies in the community. And then under capital improvements, there is $660,934 available. The committee recommended allocating $137,944 to the Home and Etman Youth Center Rehabilitation Project and $131,000 to the New Horizons Family Center Child Care Development Project. And then the balance of capital funds, or $391,990 for a city capital improvement project. Since that meeting, we have received a project proposal from the Public Works Department for a South Glendale Avenue street improvement project, and we also received a project proposal from the Verdugo WIB and the Verdugo Job Center for a specific employment and training counseling program to be operated out of the Verdugo Job Center, which is the city's one-stop employment and training center on South Central. So based on the receipt of these project proposals and staff's analysis of the goals of the economic stimulus funds, HUD's priorities for public infrastructure projects, and shovel readiness, in addition to input from the advisory committee and city departments and HUD's strict timeframes for developing a proposed plan, we would like to make the following recommendations, which would represent revisions to the recommendations originally made by the CDBG Advisory Committee. First, we would recommend the $88,000 for planning program management. We would recommend the $98,891 for the Glendale Youth Alliance Youth Employment Program. We would recommend the $33,109 in social service funds for the Verdugo Job Center Employment and Training Counseling and Assistance Program. Then we would recommend the full allocation for capital improvement projects to the Public Works South Glendale Avenue Street Improvement Project as projects which would be more in line with the goals and objectives of the economic stimulus program and which would more effectively demonstrate a shovel-ready project. So as you can see, the main differences between the Advisory Committee's original recommendations and what staff is proposing is to identify the $33,000 for a employment and training program operated by the Verdugo Job Center, and to substitute the Home and Men and the New Horizons projects with a Public Works Public Improvement Project. And those would be the main differences between what we would like the Advisory Committee to consider today and what you've already recommended. We do have the city engineer available to make a presentation on the South Glendale Avenue Street Improvement Project. We also have the manager of the Verdugo Job Center to describe what that employment training program is all about.
Okay. Let's see here. Before we get to that, do we have any questions regarding these changes from CDBG members or comments?
If I may.
Sure.
So basically, instead of issuing RFPs for employment programs, we just decided that they have a program and we're just going to fund that program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anything else, Mr. Bagdasarian?
No, that's all. No.
Mr. Cornell?
Mr. Duran, it just concerns me after our last meeting when we made the recommendations we did, even though it wasn't complete as far as getting assessments from the various city departments. My concern, if we revise this and act today, what's to prevent the same scenario coming back, say a month later, that we didn't incorporate this or that and have to redo the whole thing and face a new situation here. So that's my dilemma. After we made careful deliberation, heard the various parties, and made our assessment based at that time with the best judgment we could make, and then coming around to have to redo it at this time and say that all the information or the process wasn't complete. So my concern is if we do it and revise it this time, what's to say if we, a month later, that we have another meeting, as we're having now, and have to revise it from our action today?
Yes.
I guess.
Committee Member Cornell, that's an excellent point. My answer to that is under the regular CDBG program, we have a very established process for developing a funding plan, an annual funding plan. For the economic stimulus program, these are very special circumstances, and this is a very unique process. I can tell you that you can expect as a committee member and as staff that appreciates the time and the effort that you put into this and how valuable it is to have a consistent process. It's only because it's economic stimulus funding and there are different and unique plan development procedures prescribed by HUD that we're doing this. Otherwise, you're right. Once you've made your recommendations, the next step is to make a report to the City Council and request Council's approval of your recommendations, and then the Council makes the final a decision, which is what we will have to do again. After today's meeting, the next step is for staff to make a report to City Council and request final approval from City Council on recommendations.
Mr. Bagdasarian?
The requirement from what I read is that the project be started by December 15 and there'll be a shovel-ready project. Is that the two main criterias?
Committee Member Bagdasarian, that's absolutely correct. One of the things that I haven't touched on is the two recommendations you made at your last meeting to fund New Horizons and to fund Home and Edmond. At least in the case of New Horizons, well, in both cases, your recommendation was predicated on or subject to being able to confirm that the project was shovel-ready. And that we had a clear understanding of the project description and what the funds were going to be used for in order for us to go back and verify that they're an eligible use of the economic stimulus funds. To be perfectly honest, we're not sure that we can say that the New Horizons project would be ready to start construction by December 15th. And we're not that sure with the Home and Edmond project either. In fact, I think they're here today to speak to that themselves. If you want to hear from them directly,
Would it be more appropriate?
Bagdasarian?
Would it be more appropriate for these representatives to come and speak? That way, we can come back to the issue and then deliberate and then make decisions based on what we hear from everybody. Because
Sure.
I am based on what I've heard, based on the stimulus fund requirements of starting by December 15 and also be shovel ready. These projects may be that, but in addition, they're also serving the low income families, which is another very important hard requirement. And you instead of and I'm not, obviously we need to hear everything, but instead of just working on curbs and streets, you're obviously allocating some funds to them, but also taking care of issues that in this day and age help the low-income families and so forth. So I suggest that we move on to hearing what this, individuals have to say and come back to a deliberation.
1 second, Mr. Sinanian. I will take your suggestion under advisement. I think I want to give a chance for every committee member to ask questions about the process by which staff got to this point, and then we'll listen to both the engineer on the city side and the Verdugo Hills Verdugo Job Training Center. And then, obviously New Horizons and Home Net Men are represented here today, and then we can make deliberations on that point. Mr. Olivares, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I see two issues here. One is, which is a simple answer, is whether Home and Edmond and New Horizons will be ready to go on the ground by December. That's easy. And then the other one, we need to review I think we should review the other proposals before we
Sure.
decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Sinanian?
Along the same lines, I understand the shovel readiness issue is a requirement and an important one. I'm not diminishing it, but is there anything other than the shovel readiness aspect of it that makes the Public Works Department project better or more suitable for the stimulus package money than the New Horizons and Home and Edmond programs? In other words, is it, other than the fact that this project is connected to the city directly, what is it that makes it a better program for the stimulus funds than the Home and Edmond and the New Horizons programs? Because as my fellow board members pointed out, they do serve very important purposes, and this is an issue we've already deliberated and discussed, and based on those discussions, decisions were made. So if you could answer that, Mr. Duran.
Mr. Duran?
Yes, Committee Member Sinanian, the only comment I'd like to make in response to your comment is, at your last meeting, we did not have the city projects available for you to consider. The only thing we had available were the two community projects. Had we had the other project proposals, they would have been in the mix. And maybe not, your recommendations would have been different. But I'm going to have Mr. Carrillo expand on the criteria for economic stimulus projects.
Yeah, we just, about 2 weeks ago, we had webinars and seminars with HUD to talk about the stimulus funds and what the requirements are. And essentially, they are looking for the infrastructure projects as the priority projects on your list. And the emphasis, again, is the wider improvements to cities and removing and starting job creation immediately. So these public work jobs, big construction jobs that can start right away are their first priority, and those are the big street improvements, the alley improvements, the larger projects, which is for the majority of the cities around this area are those street improvement projects. I think with the public works project, we're looking at 50 or more jobs created, construction jobs. The second issue is tied into your consolidated plan and your overall neighborhood improvement areas, which South Glendale, which is one of the projects you're looking at, is one of our targeted areas, which we had not really started on because of funding, and that was something seen in our consolidated plan. So that's another area they were looking at. Those are essentially the main areas of starting infrastructure projects that start immediately with construction jobs. We just got a notice today from HUD, again, to inform us that the requirements are certainly something coming from the President's office to start the stimulus package going now. There's been some delays from some cities, but again, it's because we just got notified, so the emphasis is starting with these shovel-ready projects and not doing the smaller projects, which may take a little longer. Again, that's the direction we're getting from the administration and from HUD directly to the cities to begin doing these projects.
So, Mr. Bagdasarian?
Is the issue, maybe I'm not clear on this. So the capital improvement funds, is the issue whether you build the streets and pavements versus buildings like commitment and horizon, or even allocating more money from social services to capital improvement? Is that also in what we're discussing today? Maybe I'm not clear on this.
Well, the question is whether there's two programs. One is the social services, which HUD does, of course, allow us to use 15% of our grant for those specific issues. So one would be certainly working on the job creation and job retention effort, along with a broader infrastructure program to create, at least for now, temporary construction jobs that will start immediately. So they're actually two separate programs and two separate emphasis on job creation, job development. They're not looking at, for example, counseling programs or after-school programs. That is, for them, the direction that this regular CDBG program should be looking at.
It seems to me the change that we're discussing now has to do with changing one capital improvement to another capital improvement. Is that correct? You're going from the streets to buildings that also, in addition to being capital improvements, they're also serving the community.
But based on the direction, based on direction from HUD and their requirements, and again, we're also looking at all these stringent funding requirements that HUD has emphasized to us, which in essence is telling us to use funds for infrastructure so you avoid the quarterly reporting, all the income verification, which is required for projects, to look at those projects. So a lot of direction is coming from HUD, not necessarily from our own policies, but is really directly from the administration.
Yes, Mr. Duran?
Yes, Mr. Chair, at your last meeting, you did approve $391,000 for a public infrastructure project. What we are recommending is instead to recommend $660,000 for a public infrastructure project, and possibly for the 10-11 CDBG program, we can look at funding New Horizons, and we can look at funding Home and Edmond. You also at our last meeting, you also recommended providing Home and Edmond with how much was it? $70,000. With $70,000
approximately.
Approximately from the additional $98,000 to this CDBG entitlement program that we are receiving. So there are ways to make those two projects whole. We're recommending that we not deal with economic stimulus because we have a better use a use that is more consistent with the goals and the intent of the economic stimulus program to use those funds for.
Okay, well, let's judge that. Did you have a comment? Let's go ahead and get an idea of what we're looking at, and I'll save my comments actually on some of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Carrillo, till after we see. I want to make sure we get an opportunity. So why don't we start actually with the city engineer?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Rubik Olanyan, City Engineer. I'm just here to briefly make a presentation on our proposed project. It essentially is the rehabilitation and street improvements along 1/3 of a mile stretch of Glendale Avenue between San Fernando Road and Chevy Chase Drive, obviously in South Glendale. It consists of removal and replacement of damaged curb and gutters, sidewalks, as well as installation and upgrade of existing ADA curb ramp facilities to the most recent and current standards. We're also planning on planting 20 new street trees and helping greening of the area of the city. As mentioned, the project is going to involve at least 7 different trades in the industry. It's going to employ immediately approximately, typical of this size of project, 40 to 50 workers, as well as 4 or 5 different suppliers. We are mobilized, ready to go to council with the process of bidding and award and certification of the contract. So essentially, in 4 months, going through the standard process required by the law, we will be shovel-ready to go to construction sometime in November. The construction will last approximately 3 to 4 months, pending on unforeseen conditions or severe weather situations. And our department has committed approximately $700,000 out of our capital improvement project to pay for the balance of the cost of the work. Essentially, that's what I have to present on this project. If I'm available here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions, actually. You said it was a total of 1/3 of a mile?
Yes.
And what are the current conditions of the sidewalks? Bless you.
There are approximately 20 to 25% of the sidewalks and curbs and gutters in need of repair. Last time we paved the street was in 1992. So it has approximately 3 to 4 years left before it will need a complete reconstruction. So the resurfacing of the pavement is a preventive maintenance effort to avoid the complete reconstruction of the street.
So I see. So if you do not do this maintenance, then in 3 to 4 years there would need to be a complete reconstruction of the street?
Correct.
And if you do, how long does that delay?
Another 20 to 25 years.
So, okay. And so you said there are approximately 40 to 50 employees that this job would be adding?
Typical of the size of these projects that we've had in the past, the workers that get employment during the course of the construction, it could range anywhere from 40 to 50.
Now, what would happen if you didn't receive all of the funds from the CDBGR? What would the process be? Because it sounds like this is still necessary.
It is necessary. However, we have streets in the city in far worse condition, and we'll just use the available funds to repave some other streets.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Olivares.
Thank you. So if you didn't get these funds, is the $1.3 million already allocated?
No,
So that's in the future sometime.
correct.
Now, the 40 to 50 employees, are they city employees or are they contractors?
Contractor private employees.
They're independent contractors?
Correct.
Okay. And then in terms of the street itself, you're looking at repairing from sidewalk, basically from property line, the street, across to the other property line. So we're not just doing sporadic pieces here and there, or are we?
As far as the sidewalk's concerned, we will replace what's necessary, the broken and damaged concrete sidewalk. But where the street pavement is concerned, all the way from gutter on one side to the other, from the edge of the gutter to the other edge of the gutter.
So in reality, by the end of February or so, Glendale, that stretch will be brand new.
Brand new with 20 additional trees.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
You said that there are other streets that are in much more need of repair. Are those streets that are receiving funding already for repairs, or otherwise, why is this money not being requested for those roads?
Do you mean CDBG stimulus?
This specific amount.
Because they fall outside the boundaries that is eligible for CDBG funding.
Like, what kind of areas are those?
West side of Glendale, we have some in La Crescenta, we have some in north of Colorado.
You mentioned that you're repaving the street as well,
Yes.
but that has nothing to do with this money. Is that a separate?
No, that's included in the project.
Okay, so it's not only the removal and repair of damaged or broken curbs, gutters, driveway aprons, or sidewalks, but it's also a complete repaving of the street.
Yes,
And that's included in the $1.3 million.
correct.
Okay, that wasn't made clear here. Any other questions?
Yes.
Cornell?
Sure. I see here on your packet that you estimate the total project cost at $1,300,000. Is that also your engineer's estimate on the job?
Yes.
On this job here, how long has this been in the pipeline? Because generally, on projects of this size and magnitude, there's pretty much long-range planning on these.
Correct.
And I understand of the times, particularly with the package, the stimulus package and so on, the opportunity for the city to take advantage of this, which why you're here. But how long has this been in the pipeline as far as the planning process?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, at our department we have a computerized pavement conditioning system that rates the condition of the existing street pavements and generates recommendations for various types of maintenance efforts on streets that range from a slurry seal quote to complete reconstruction that I mentioned previously. Glendale Avenue obviously has come up for resurfacing the last 3-4 years. However, due to funding restrictions and, as I mentioned earlier, other streets that have far worse pavement conditions requiring complete reconstruction has taken away available funding for resurfacing, and we have concentrated on those streets. As well as we have spent more than $1 million a year in the last 2-3 years on slurry sealing of residential streets that had been neglected for a number of years. Keeping all that factors in mind, we will not have paved this section of Glendale Avenue if this funding wasn't available for another 3-4 years. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Bagdasarian?
So that's the $700,000 is already in the budget, and if it was not for this project, would it be used for some other project that the CDBG funds are not tied to it, and some other projects could be worked on?
Yes.
And you said the last time this work was done was in 1992, and it still has a few more years that could be.
Yes.
Now, when you look at the project, and I know some questions were asked about, what are you replacing and so forth. Are there different levels of, when you look at a crack, different level of crack that could be repaired, so the cost would go from $1.3 million lower to something that could be done with lesser amount of funds?
Mr. Chair, Committee Member Bagdasarian, that's a very good question. Every time even our computer-generated recommendation gives us in street, we take a close look at it just to avoid situations like that. We don't replace any kind of facility unless it's absolutely necessary. There's ADA, very strict ADA guidelines that gives us a threshold on the size of differential level between sidewalks that are broken that needs to be replaced, and that's 1/2 inch. So every time we come across a 1/2 inch of a lift in a sidewalk, that entire panel needs to be replaced. If there are cracks that we can repair, we definitely do. We don't replace everything. If the differential difference is less than 1/2 inch, we don't necessarily replace them. We grind it and make it passable for people in the wheelchair. So that is bare minimum that's required to have a complete new rehabilitated street, basically.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Sinani?
Do you know why this proposal was not made before the May 13th meeting?
Committee Member Sinanian, at our May 13th meeting, the implementation rules for the economic stimulus program were only 4 or 5 days old. We had just received them. They were just published, and we're still in the process of analyzing them. So it had probably been 1 or 2 days before our last meeting that we actually notified the departments that we are interested in receiving project proposals from the departments. So they hadn't had time to put a proposal together at the time that we had our last meeting.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Ohani. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite the representative from the Verdugo Job Center.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. We actually are proposing...
Excuse me, Judith, could you give your name for the record?
Sure. It's Judith Cernas. I'm the manager of the Verdugo Job Center. Our proposal, submitted by the Workforce Investment Board and Verdugo Job Center, is to enroll 30 low-income adults based on the CDBG criteria of low income and provide them with intense career counseling, job services, workshops, job clubs, and short-term occupational training as needed. This actually will help us work with low-income population with CDBG. Currently, our center is funded through the Workforce Investment Act. The Workforce Investment Act low-income criteria is extremely low, and CDBG allows the flexibility in outreaching to low-income families that don't meet our current criteria under the Workforce Investment Act. Certain short-term occupationals will really depend on the 30 individuals, what their barriers to employment are, what exactly their needs are, and it would help actually hire a new staff person to work specifically with the CDBG grant. I'm open if you ask any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer.
Yes, I have several.
Great.
How many people do you serve right now with your current funding?
Well, we actually, last year, we started a whole new service delivery system that we decided to enroll everybody into our center who comes in through the front door. We never done that before. So to date, we've enrolled 5,000 individuals. Those individuals do not have a career counselor. What they do is they have access to our services. This particular funds, this population would actually be assigned a career counselor. So that's the big difference that you would see.
Do you have current career counseling?
We do. We have 3 career counselors right now on staff, so this would require an additional career counselor because the career counselors, as you can imagine, with 5,000 individuals coming, is not enough.
So how many people do they serve in a program? I mean, do you have a program currently that is comparable to this one that you're proposing?
Currently, we offer a comprehensive array of job services. What this particular program would do is just specifically work with low-income families in Glendale. Our center is open to everybody. People from Palmdale, Lancaster actually come to seek our services. So right now, the staffing we have on site is actually to serve those customers who come and use our center. We have anywhere between 300 and 400 people a day coming to use our services. We then, the career counselors I spoke about, the three, those people we have in training, they actually work closely with those individuals in training.
And have you applied for CDBG funds in
No, we
in
haven't.
the recent past?
No, we haven't applied for CDBG.
Why not?
Well, that's a great question, and I think this is a great opportunity to explore CDBG funding. The Glendale Youth Alliance is currently housed within the Verdugo Job Center, so we're extremely familiar with the process, but this is something we want to explore specifically because our outcome is employment. After we enroll these 30 individuals, our goal is they will be successfully employed during the duration of the program.
And last question from me, where does your funding currently come from now?
Right now, half of our funding comes from the Workforce Investment Act, which is an act passed by Congress. Other funding come from special grants from the state of California, and they're targeted for dislocated workers. We actually have a grant right now. If you are dislocated from Mervyn's, Circuit City, Yahoo, we're able to provide short-term occupational training. So we apply for specialized grants based on the need of our local region.
Very good. Questions?
It's a simple question.
Mr. Olivares.
If the people you're going to serve, clearly they're unemployed at this point in time, given the current economic situation, what is your expectation as to where they'll be placed, how long before they get placed in a job?
Sure. We understand with the economy, finding a job for anybody is extremely difficult, and what we find is individuals' barriers to employment is more difficult. The short-term occupational training is actually in high-demand careers. We have a business services team at the Verdugo Job Center. Their main focus is to outreach to businesses and look for industries and opportunities where we can hold recruitments. We try to do recruitments at our center every month for specific companies. We did the recruitment for TJ Maxx. When they were hiring, they came to us for the Americanet brand, so we actively seek out job opportunities. Right now, what we're seeing on average, it takes 6 months to a year to find employment, so it really depends on the person's skill set. Everybody comes with a different skill set. If we feel that one of these individuals needs training on average is anywhere between 6 to 8 months, so after the training, our hope is with the new skill they obtain, they will be successfully employed. So right now, on average, with our current grant, our outcome base is entered employment. We have an 80% entered employment rate based on the grants we currently have.
Thank you.
Mr. Bagassarian?
So the services that are provided, and you said there were 30 low-income individuals, what type of services? You mentioned duration of 4 or 5 months, you'll work with them.
Sure.
You mentioned training. Give me some examples,
Sure.
if you could, what type of things are done for this 30.
Sure. Usually what we do when we have a specific grant is we outreach in the community for 30 low-income individuals. They meet with a career counselor one-on-one. The career counselor is experienced to do a thorough assessment of their barriers to employment. When was the last time they worked? Why haven't they been successful in looking for jobs? Do they have skills that currently are in demand in the labor market? So based on that thorough conversation, which lasts anywhere between 1 hour to an hour and a half, they're able to identify what is preventing this person from getting a job. Based on that, the career counselor makes recommendation that this person needs a skills upgrade, or they might need a brusher up in workshops, resume writing, how to present themselves to the employer, or they might need a job club, which is our support group for those people who are currently looking for a job, but they need other individuals to support each other because it's a difficult task. We also have computer classes at the Verdugo Job Center, so it really depends, that conversation with the career counselor, what their needs are.
So the program covers the initial assessment.
Correct.
after the initial assessments, if it's identified that they need computer training, is that computer training is also included in this program?
Correct. We would actually leverage a lot of the training. On average, training costs anywhere between $5,000 to $6,500. It's in anywhere from fields of accounting, medical billing and coding, HVAC, any areas that we see there's a demand for employment. That's the areas that we usually send people to training. So the career counselor really helps them identify if you're changing careers, this is the outlook for that career. So that this is all included. And what this program actually provides is that one-on-one career counseling. Normally, people coming to the center have access to the service. These particular individuals will have a career counselor that they can talk to, and they can follow up and be able to see if they need training or not.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Duran?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
I think one reason that the Job Center does not apply for CDBG funds is because they would be applying under the social service categories, and those funds, as you know, are very, very competitive. And because their primary funding source is WIA funds from the Workforce Investment Act, which comes from Department of Labor to EDD and then down to the Verdugo WIB, they make do with their WIA funds and other discretionary grants and don't apply for CDBG. Obviously, the Economic Stimulus CDBG program was ideal for them to submit a proposal because, again, economic stimulus is emphasizing employment training services and outcomes that will result in job placements, and that's what they do. That's their specialty. So they submitted a proposal. Their proposal would allow them to target low-income families or low-income individuals living in southern Glendale to receive these intensive employment training services and job placement services that they currently cannot do because the income criteria for their regular funding source is a lot lower than CDBG. And so this would help them leverage their services
And
help us.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Duran. And I have no doubt. I mean, it sounds like it's a great organization. But I do have a question for you and for Mr. Carrillo. In the absence of an RFP, how did you make that determination, comparing the capabilities of the Verdugo Job Center versus some of the currently funded CDBG programs that also offer job assistance and have demonstrated an ability to manage these CDBG funds?
Chairman Marion, it's the Job Center is an existing program. They have the administrative capacity, the financial capacity to administer grant funds on programs that do job placement. I don't know what community organizations we are currently funding or that are out in the community that would have that same level of capacity. And again, the emphasis is economic stimulus funds on programs that are ready to go or they're going. There are going to be much stricter reporting requirements with economic stimulus than the regular CDBG program, and it's already a challenge for nonprofit organizations, as I think you've heard over the years, how difficult it is to have to comply with our requirements because we require a lot. Well, this is going to be worse. And the Job Center does that on a regular basis, and so they would be capable of complying with those requirements.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duran. Okay, let's go to Dr. Maria Rochart.
Or borrow the chair. The pedestal. Gary left. It's okay. I can handle it. If you could pass this to them. Good afternoon, Chair Marion and committee. I'm glad all of you are here today. I am here to talk about that. It's great that we're going to fix Glendale Avenue. I have nothing against that, but I told them about my street. It has potholes and it's in the unincorporated part, Piedmont Avenue. It's been on the calendar for 20 years. So I said, hey, what happened to Piedmont? So on that note, I I heard that there would be temporary workers. I heard there would be 40 or 50 workers. What you have in front of you would be an 18-month project with 40 or 50 workers, and it would give teachers and counselors and other people opportunities for jobs. I have right now a state of California preschool contract that I don't know where to hold it. I've gone to everywhere to see where I can hold it, and I don't have a place where to hold it. We probably would have to go back to where we were leasing up the street. If you ever driven by it, it looks really bad right now. Since we moved in, there's nobody who has come back to the building, so we're trying to see if we don't break ground in October, which we are shovel ready. We do have the funds. There is an anonymous donor that's coming up with the funding, plus foundations. You do have the report that are giving the other funding. Also, all our board members have pledged funding for this project. So what is holding up the parade would be just finishing. Actually, the money will go back to the city because it's all in planning and permits and all of that this $131,000, if you have it in front of you, would go back to the city. And it would give jobs to 40 or 50, not for 3 to 4 months, but for 18 months to actual 2 years, depending on the weather. And it also will create jobs for low income, for teachers and counselors, and how to run family. We do have wraparound programs, so we do have a family resource center. So it will create jobs. It will be part of the stimulus package, and we are ready. And America's United Bank is handling our capital funds. If anybody knows about that bank, Amy Navarrete, she would be more than happy to talk to any of you. She's the one holding the account for our capital funds. So we would break ground in October. That is our estimated time. Given these funds coming, this is our shortfall, and everything else is going to be covered by private funds, so hopefully you won't have to see my face over and over again asking for funding for this project. I know I've talked to Mr. Amirian about it. It's been on the books, I think, for the city for over 3.5 years to 4. I keep having children, and as you know, the economic things that are happening in our community, really it's Home Minutemen or New Horizons or places like that are going to even come up to the surface even higher to take care of these low-income and individuals and homeless children. So with that said, I'm all for fixing the streets and all of that, but I do have to advocate for the kids and the family that we serve, the low-income in South Glendale.
Thank you. If I may ask, Mr. Duran, Mr. Carrillo, how was the determination made that New Horizons did not demonstrate shovel readiness versus the city project, for example?
Chairman Marion, New Horizons is still in plan check. They've been in plan check for approximately 1 year. They're in the phase where the city's completed the initial plan check and the plans were given back for corrections. So it's in the stage where the city's still waiting for corrections. We don't know how long it's going to take their architect or their construction manager to complete those corrections. I think it's intimated in the letter that they submitted to us that they're waiting for these funds in order to pay that designer to complete the corrections, to submit the plans, and hopefully they'll be approved by the city this time and not have to go back. Then they have to get the bid documents ready to execute contracts and start construction, and we just can't tell that it would be shovel ready.
But we gave you a timeline, right?
I'm sorry, Mr. Rochart. So, in the estimation of staff, there is no assurance that there's no assurance that they would be definitely shovel ready by November. That's what you're telling me was the determination that was made.
Correct.
Mr. Carrillo?
No, Mr. Oliver had a question.
Mr. Olivares?
Well, I'd like to hear from the sponsor. I'd like to hear where it is in plan check, who's plan checking it, and let us know if you're shovel ready.
We're shovel ready. We were shortfall. We were here 2 months ago or a month and a half ago when we were here, that we didn't have to finish the process inside the city for revisions and permits. Our architect, he just left, but he came to the city, talked with Moises, talked with Plan Check, and Plan Check was the one who gave him the timeline. So this came from your planning department. I didn't make it up.
No, so if I understand correctly, then it's been through Plan Check once.
Correct.
I know who the architect is, and I know the construction
Right.
company.
Correct.
They're reliable.
So, I mean, they came to the planning department and spoke to the planning department.
So your architect is telling you at this point what needs to happen and how long is it going to take?
Exactly.
But do you know that information?
Yes, it's in your timeline in your packet.
So you are confirming what's...
Correct.
So
I'm
you're saying-
confirming what is in this document.
Okay. So you're saying you'd be ready to start construction
Yes.
in October?
Right. 10 weeks from now.
So you do also then, on a different note, you take issue with the revisions, with the revised budget that we're looking at today? Because it's affecting your numbers.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just want
Mr.
to
Sinanian?
confirm what I think is part of the proposal. There will be, this project will, in an estimate, provide jobs for about 25 to 30 people for a duration of about 14 months.
To 18 months, yeah.
18 months. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, I'll have a follow-up with what Mr. Alvarez said. I know your work ethics and how hard that you worked on this along with staff.
Yes.
It's not easy.
No?
There's always bottlenecks. We went on the good faith estimate when you're here on May 13th to approve the funding here. And from what you say now, from what Mr. Oliver's questions to you were, I don't see, unless you can bring to my attention here on your readiness that you have on the timetable, as you said, was submitted by the Plan Check Department. Were any bottlenecks that may occur during this time frame? We have, I believe, according to the package, you mentioned in October, I think the deadline to be shovel-ready is December 16th.
Correct.
And I see from what you submitted here, plus your testimony to this committee on May 13th, that you're going to be even ahead of that time frame in October.
Correct. This is by the planning department.
Yeah.
Okay, the timeline that was put in this proposal, I didn't come up with it, I typed it. Okay, so I am the typist to this. But it came from your planning department through our architect.
Having been in this, you know, I have so long memories when I was in the Junior Chamber of Commerce. We were trying to fund the local YMCA. And I had about 5 members on my committee. And for one reason or other, everyone raised their hand. I got something else, I can't do it, family, whatever. Who was left? Me. So I had to go out. I didn't do much. I didn't raise the amount of the goal that we anticipated, but I got something. And I know you personally, I know from your background, your work ethics,
You can call
the
it
kind
back.
of work that you have done. To me, you're in the class of Susie Welcher of GE, and
You know,
I
I
could just-
found
I
the
could just
anonymous
imagine.
donor found me. I just
Yeah.
want you to know that. I did not look for the person. The person found New Horizons and fell in love with the project. Will see the project to the end. So I cannot tell you that somewhere along the line somebody's on the side of this project.
Yeah.
Because this project has been sitting on your shelves, and you can check it for over 3 years. I mean, Efrain was here, I think, from the beginning of it. It's been sitting on the shelf for over 3.5 years. I think it's enough. It's time to just get it done.
I'm happy you're here to reassure us on that,
Yeah, so-
because from reading the report, I had some learning efforts until
Yeah.
you reaffirmed this.
But, you know, I'm all over the streets. I want the streets to be good as long as Piedmont Avenue gets done.
Thank you, Mr. Rochard. Mr. Bagdasarian?
I want to go back to what you were mentioning that this project not only will take care of the employment for a longer duration of the time, it serves the low-income, a part of the town, but then it provides the
Jobs.
services for jobs for those
For teachers.
individuals. In addition, the parents who would be able to bring their children there. That's
Correct.
the real value.
And really, I don't want to keep coming here. To tell you, I love you all, and you are more than welcome to be with your hard hats and dig. But, this needs to get off the ground for children. Right now, I'm looking at going back to a lease that I really didn't want to. And Mr. Carrillo knows I've been all over town looking for a facility to accommodate these children, and I can't. So I'm going to have to go back to a lease for at least a year and a half.
And this is where I was going with it. This is a long-term, permanent building that would be providing
Correct.
these services for years and
Yeah.
years to come, as opposed to employment
Right.
of 40 months or 5 months for 40 people.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Bagdasarian. Mr. Olivares?
One question. If the funding that's proposed today gets recommended, what does that do to you?
I go and throw a party? No, I'm just kidding. We start working with your planning department. That's what we need to do
This-
right away.
The amount that's been recommended today,
Right, because if you know, then we would have to supply 986 to be exact. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So then you are okay with the
Yeah,
recommendations that we have today?
correct. I'm not going over what I said that I needed as a shortfall.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duran?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have an eligibility question I'm going to let Mr. Carrillo ask.
Yes, actually, maybe if Dr. Richard can answer the question. I know we spoke about this before, but the question, again, readiness is kind of, again, a question of whether or not a project has sufficient funding to continue on beyond its original conception. Again, correct if I'm wrong, Dr. Richard, the project was in plan check, has been stopped for a year because of as mentioned last meeting, funding was not provided to the architect to stop work. So this funding that was proposed is not to pay old funds, because you cannot back pay something that's old already, but to pay for the project that's moving forward.
Correct.
I guess the question is the cost owed is $131,000, and
It's already
is that something
been
New
taken
Horizon-
care of.
Is that taken care of?
Yes, Mr. Carrillo.
So that's something, again, we were just wondering if that was paid for, and this funds would go for the new.
This is new, and you have it in front of
Mr.
you.
Rochard, 1 second,
I know.
please. Mr. Carrillo?
And
Go
so
ahead.
that's what we were just trying to clarify, if funds were paid for the fees owed, because otherwise the architect cannot proceed with plan check without the funds.
Right.
Mr. Olivares?
Make sure I understand. So prior to this meeting, prior to this, there was a balance owed to the architect, and work had obviously stopped because the funding wasn't there. You're saying now the balance has been paid to the architect?
Correct.
And with the if these recommendations are approved today, you can proceed to finalize plan check.
Finalized plan check.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Be ready for permit.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rochard.
Thank you. You all have a good afternoon.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you. And we have a representative from HomeNetMen as well.
Mr. Chairman, member of the committee, staff.
If you could state your name, please.
Armand Gorgorian, HomeNetMen. Been in this city for 30 years, 31 years, and I will be the last person to say don't do any streets or don't fix anything in this city. I'm more than willing to do my share of helping. Also, being in the city for a long time and being involved with different projects in this city, specifically Pacific Edison, which I was chairing the committee, I know how city projects can drag and how they can add to the dollar value that they originally started with. So, and I'm not doubting the public works or the community development department when they say that, well, this will be done in $600,000 or something. But there is always that doubt, because it has to go out to tender, and there's, in the meantime, there always the plans are being changed, and the time is going far ahead, and everything else. So I have my doubts in regards to that project. I wish there was enough money to fix all the cities of this Glendale, all the streets of the Glendale. Our project is more than shovel ready. Our activities, our civil work, every aspect of our project is ahead of the funding. And I believe, I think, I would like to think that Mr. Carrillo working closely with us, because we consult with him every step of the work, will attest to what I'm saying, that we are ready for every aspect of it. The money that is being asked for the stimulus package will take us 2 months, and that is the, let's say, average time to go out to tender and to get the permits. And the permits is for that famous electrical panel that we have to move. And I'm sure that has nothing to do with plan checking and all that stuff. It's a simple thing to do. Except for that, there's nothing that will stop us from doing that. Not only we are ready for December 15, we want to finish it by end of September. So we're anxious, we want to do this, and I believe that if you have allocated so much money to this project already, you would like to see the conclusion of this and the fruition of this project. As Dr. Rochard said, and I feel for her also, we are the 2 largest youth organizations in Glendale serving youth, and we have to finalize these projects to be able to serve more youth. Being shovel-ready, being eligible, every aspect of it you look, yes, we are eligible and we are ready to do the project. And I am more than willing to answer any questions.
Mr. Olivares?
I know electrical, the panel that we had a good discussion about prior. Where is the building permit?
Building permits, we have it.
You already have a building
we
permit?
have it. We actually, today, the inspectors were there. We are going to get all the finals in regards to that portion of it that we have done. It's all been taken care of. Last time, Mr. Olivares, you weren't here. I had an open invitation. You were not here, Mr. Baggett. I had an open invitation for all of you. I would love to take you all there to the center to see what your money has done. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow, any day that it's convenient for you, come and see for yourself and see what we've done there. We are ahead of the project. We have ahead of scheduling. And I couldn't say that in the past projects. I've always been late, but this time we are actually there.
And you're still managing the construction in-house, as you suggested in your
Yes,
original
we are.
proposal?
Yes, we are.
Okay. In the amount that's being recommended today, $137,000, are you okay with that number?
Yes. I have the details of it. I believe you've seen that. The lighting, the gymnasium lighting, which will go more efficient and
No, and I saw that. My
Yeah.
question is more, if this is what we approved today, is that an acceptable number to you?
Yes, because that is what we proposed. That is what we calculated. I don't see anything more than that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olivares? Any other
I'm done.
questions? Okay. Oh, thank you.
No, you just, I think you meant Mr. Bagdasarian.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Olivares.
The other Mr. Olivares.
It's
The other one, I hope he's at home.
It's been a long week already.
How does he get 2 thank yous here, huh?
Yeah.
I'll take you up on...
Oh, okay, Mr.
Gary?
Cornell. You don't have to.
Oh, I'll take that up.
Okay, Mr. Cornell.
I don't see a timetable here as we have for New Horizons, but what Mr. Olivares said that you had the permit, does that include the electrical permit as well?
For the panel? No, sir.
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay.
But if you tell me today that you have that money, it will take me 2 hours to go to Newspress to submit the bid proposal and give them 3 weeks to give us bids. And then after the bids are approved by City of Glendale, start the replacement of that. And we foresee for 2 months.
We told you that on May 13th, though.
Yes, but then again, we know how it is.
Anticipating the scenario that you just mentioned to us here, can you give this committee an estimate as far as when you expect all scenarios and everything for groundbreaking?
Mr. Cornell, what we want to do and we believe we can do is to finish everything by end of September. And again, if you come and see the project, the sea facility, Mr. Carrillo always is there. He sees that. Mr. Duran, we have to ask him to, within his busy schedule, to come with you. And all of you come and look at the project. Please do that. Give me a date, give me a time of the day that you can make it, and I will be more than happy to give you a tour.
So what you're saying is, not only would you be shovel ready by December, you'd be scissor ready by.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That'd be post-scissor ready.
Yeah.
By December.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Because we gotta get to the fun part. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Gregorian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we have some discussion, and I was told that the Planning Commission starts their meeting at 4 o'clock. So worst case scenario is the public would lose, the live feed of this meeting. But I'm going to try to make sure, because this is important for everybody to see, to get us, get the meat of this discussion done by 4. I do have a few questions and a few comments quickly for Mr. Duran and Mr. Carrillo before we get started. You mentioned a webinar with HUD regarding the requirements and how they stated that it was large infrastructure projects that they wanted. Unfortunately, since I got the packet, I did a lot of research myself and a lot of reading myself, and I came across the website for the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, put out by the Department of Housing and Urban Development for the Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Grants, the CDBGR grants. And it actually makes very clear that the projects will range from small scale to large infrastructure. In fact, I have here from their website a clear statement of, and this is a quote, given programmatic differences between annual CDBG and CDBGR funds, more specifically the intent to use Recovery Act funds to support projects that generate jobs in the near term and create a foundation for future economic growth, HUD does not anticipate that the historical percentages for use of CDBG funds will apply. HUD is projecting and following the following distribution of uses of CDBGR funds. Public facilities and improvements, 55%. 20% water and sewer, 20% streets and roads, 15% public facilities. Now, 20% streets and roads of CDBGR funds, and this is what they expected the distribution to be. They have some other breakdowns here as well. But, I have a difficulty when this is what's put on the public website as the most up-to-date information, saying that 20% of the funds, we expect 20% of the funds should be used for infrastructure projects like streets, and we have here a proposal to use 75% of the $880,000, and in fact 100% of the capital funds. And I'd be happy to provide this to staff. It's from the recovery, government website, the HUD's website. So, maybe there is a disconnect between what HUD told you on that webinar and what they put out for the public to see. Quite frankly, that's one of the things that bothers me about government, is the disconnect between what is told in staff and what is put out in the public. Second, I have some issues just regarding how the process was made by staff to make determinations based upon information that they may or may not have. I respect staff immensely, and the job that you do is unbelievable and extremely difficult and largely thankless. But this is, as you have said, new territory for everybody. And, as great as all of you have been, I don't expect anybody to be perfect in this, in these circumstances. Seeing the projects myself, I think it's really important that streets get fixed. But you know what? I've lived in Glendale, since I was 9, 10 years old. Gladys Drive, my parents' driveway, and I lived there a while as well. Gladys Drive has been destroyed, basically, and closed for the past 5 or 6 years. I mean, the street has been closed. Now, obviously, this isn't a low, low income area, but I mean, we're still, talking about, as Mr. Ohanian said, the need to repair streets far outstrips the funding that they have available. And I understand that completely. But he also made clear that we are talking about 2 to 3 years at least that, this street has before, it has to be completely scrapped. And also, another 2 to 3 years that it's been in the project and the computer has been spitting out Glendale between San Fernando and Chevy Chase. So, the recommendations that we had made, and I'm sure now with Mr. Bagdasarian and Mr. Olivares here, I think would support, first of all, the percentage that's given on the website, $300 some odd thousand, $391,000, almost $400,000 we had said, that the city can use, as they see fit for projects that they see fit. We have 2 programs here that have demonstrated for the past 15, 20, 25 years, maybe longer, their ability to, monitor these funds, use these funds, and they have hit home runs year after year after year. So, right now, even before we get started, my inclination, my leaning would be to maintain the recommendations that we had made. As far as the social projects are concerned, I have no doubt, given how good of a program GYA is and the fact that it works out of the Verdugo Job Center, I have no questions regarding the Verdugo Job Center's ability to administrate, especially considering all of their funds are state and federal funds. But again, they've never applied for CDBG funds, and I understand the reasoning why. But to eliminate an RFP process when we know that we have organizations that also have existing job creation facilities and job creation programs, it's very difficult for me. It's very difficult for me. And we live right now in a society, with all due respect to our great government in the city of Glendale, we live in a society now that we are seeing government is inefficient, is becoming inefficient, and is not spending the money as they should. And I have problems with an attempt here, what I perceive as an attempt to have $600,000 of this stimulus money go straight, to do something that the city should already be doing, fixing roads. And then, after we recommended $100,000 to GYA, a city social project to make them whole, that last $33,000, which we had put up for an RFP process, is then taken away and given to another government, entity. So that's where I stand on it, and I wanted to make that clear because I read and I read and I read this past week after I saw the documents. I want to give an opportunity also to my fellow committee members to ask any questions and give any thoughts they have before we put this on the table and basically approve or disapprove the funding recommendations that are put out by staff. Anybody want to bat after the leadoff guy? Mr. Bagdasarian?
I would say I'm in 100% agreement with what our chairperson mentioned about the use of funds being used for street as opposed to the organizations that were in questions, and they had funds allocated, and I'm all part looking forward to our deliberation, see what we can be done about it.
Thank you. Mr. Cornell?
Mr. Chairman, I pretty much echo the thoughts, concerns that you just mentioned. From hearing from the two representatives that we made funding recommendations for the May 13th meeting, I see nothing to change my mind on their readiness to be ready both in September and October this year. And I stand by that. And as much as far as the city streets and Glendale Avenue, Union San Fernando, Chevy Chase, I'm happy to see that the concerns are directed in that neighborhood. It's needed. I don't think it's going to fall apart the next day or 2 weeks or next year. It'll still be there, may cause us a little bit more. Perhaps we can plan on this a little bit more down the pipeline. The stimulus package, economic time as far as accelerating, we'll move on. It'll get better. And when it does get better, we can address this, and hopefully it'll come before us and we can say yes the next turnaround. But my concern and needs are for the two nonprofit organizations that we just heard about, and their concerns and what their mission is and what they accomplish, their goals, their objectives. And the two directors and their concerns and leadership coming this far in their organizations away concerns that input much more than resurfacing of city streets.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Mr. Olivares.
I go back to my philosophical position on this over the years, and it's always been that I believe most of the CDBG funds and including the stimulus funds should go to social service programs out in the community. Home and Edmond and New Horizons have always been there in this community. I trust them when they say that they're going to get it ready and they're going to get it started when they say they do, because they've proven it over the years. I appreciate the fact that we need to fix streets, but I don't see personally an immediate need for that. There may be a way to handle that in the future. So I was not here at the last meeting, but I did see the tapes, and I concur with your statements, and I would definitely support the recommendations that the committee made at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Olivares. Mr. Sinanian?
Yeah, not to stand out, I happen to agree with the sentiment expressed by my fellow committee members. It seems like we're having the same general problem and concern that we had during our deliberation of the 2009-2010 RFP process, where we were concerned that the city takes a big chunk of the monies that are available, and then sort of double dips by presenting its own programs or programs related to the city for the small amount that's left over, and we're sort of experiencing the same thing again. I asked earlier today what considerations were determinative for the decision to recommend the street public works program, and to be honest, the reasoning that I heard was not compelling. I understand that this, they did not have time to, the requirements weren't clear. They did not have enough time. They did not know about this, but I think that applies to everyone equally. And if you look at the totality of circumstances, the jobs that are created, the public good, the public service that it provides on top of the jobs that are created, and the fact that very important strata of our society is going to be served by the two programs that were initially recommended in May, I think I can't help but stick with our initial proposal to provide the funding to New Horizons, to Home and Edmond, and the rest, as we said, the city can allocate as it wants. I do have just two questions for Mr. Duran and Mr. Carrillo. Why was no RFP held for the $33,000? Was it cost prohibitive? I'm not sure we really heard why an RFP was not held.
Committee Member Sinanian, we did not issue an RFP because we wanted to recommend the Verdugo Job Center counseling program.
That's all the questions and comments that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd be remiss, obviously, if I didn't allow Mr. Duran and Mr. Carrillo to respond. Mr. Duran.
Mr. Chair, thank you. A couple of things. The information you read on the HUD website is inconsistent with the direction we're getting from the local office and other documents and rules and regulations that Mr. Carrillo and I have read and analyzed. And I also want to remind the committee that what we will do, as we always do, is we will prepare a staff report. We'll submit it to City Council, and the City Council will make the final approval on the funding recommendations. So we'll include a little bit of discussion of the proposals versus the recommendations by the committee. And we plan to have that report before the City Council on July 7th. So if you could pencil that into your calendars, that'll be our target date. Worst case scenario, it would be July 14th. But beyond that, well, it has to be on either one of those dates because then we'll miss HUD's submission requirements.
Very good. Thank you. I think we have a consensus here, a pretty clear consensus. In response to Mr. Duran, it's very difficult for us to do our jobs without proper information. You mentioned that it is inconsistent with what the local HUD office information that you gave to you. This is a federal government website that's been put up. So, as Mr. Carrillo mentioned, if it's coming from the president himself that he wants these monies spent, I'm trying to figure out why that disconnect is there and whether who's mistaken here, quite frankly. So I want to make sure, though, that the staff's report clearly outlines how strongly, because I believe the consensus is unanimous here, and we'll get an idea of that in just a minute once a motion is made. But I want to make sure that the staff report to the City Council, and I plan on being there, makes it very clear, based on my reading of both what's publicly available and even the documents that I was given as part of the 30 pages of documents that govern the CDBGR, that are the legal language that govern the CDBGR. I don't remember and I don't recall anything that stated that there was an overwhelming preference for projects like street projects, large infrastructural projects that Mr. Carrillo mentioned, and maybe I misunderstood. But regardless, I think right now what we need is a motion on action item A. And Mr. Duran, if I may ask, because it seems as if though the recommendations made by staff, the revised recommendations possibly look like they're not going to be approved. So would there be a motion made to not approve these and then another motion made to uphold the other standard? How would that work?
Chairman Marion, I think you can simply pass a motion to approve the original recommendations made by the committee on May 13th if you're not making any changes. Because right now that's what's on record. Had you been willing to consider the other recommendations, then the motion would have been to rescind the recommendations that you approved at the last meeting and then replace them with these recommendations, but that won't be necessary.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duran. Mr. Olivares?
I think before anybody makes a motion, perhaps a review of what the recommendations of the committee were last time for the benefit of the public
Sure.
might be in order.
Sure. Mr. Duran?
The recommendations by the CDBG Advisory Committee for the CDBG Economic Stimulus funds, which total $880,934 are as follows: $88,000 for planning and program management, $132,000 for social services, with $98,891 for the Glendale Youth Alliance Youth Employment Program, $33,109 for an RFP for employment programs to the community, an allocation of $660,934 for capital improvements, and under capital improvements, $137,944 for the Home and Edmond Youth Center Rehabilitation Project, $131,000 for the New Horizons Family Center Child Development Project, and $391,990 for a city capital improvement project, together totaling $880,934.
Mr. Olivares?
I would like to recommend also that when the funds allocated for a city capital improvement project, that we be given a report prior to executing the project. In other words, we want to know how the money is going to be used.
So
I do.
that $391,000, yes, Mr. Duran?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was going to ask, is it safe to assume that we can identify the South Glendale Avenue Street Improvement Project as under that recommendation? For
That's what I was going to actually state, that we would recommend, that $391,000 can be used for that South Glendale. Unfortunately, I don't know, based upon what Mr. Ohanian said, was if they didn't get the full amount of the funding, that they may choose to simply use the funding in other places where it's needed more.
And I think that's the reason why, if it does go in that direction, I would support that, is that, the city engineer can come back and just give us a report as to how he would use that money.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Duran.
Mr. Chair, one more thing before you guys take a vote. Well, actually, I'll wait until after you vote.
Okay, let's go ahead. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve the recommendation of the committee as done in the last meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Advisory Member Alec Bagdasarian.
Yes.
Advisory Member Gary Cornell.
Yes.
Advisory Member Efren Olivares.
Yes.
Advisory Member Zari Sinanian.
Yes.
And Chair Zari Amirian.
Aye. Okay. Goodbye, viewing public. It's 4 o'clock, but we still have some meeting materials to go over. Mr. Duran, I just want to make it very clear again. This is not in any way, a commentary by this body or anybody about the work that staff does. We appreciate it greatly. We also understand some of what, the pressures that are upon staff when making some of these recommendations. I do want to thank the city engineer and the Verdugo Hills Job Center representatives, as well as HomeNet Men and New Horizons and everybody else who came by. I strongly suggest that, when City Council, hopefully in their wisdom, approves our recommendations, that the Verdugo Hills Job Center participate in that RFP for that $33,000, because I think it's a good program. And thank you to the committee members. Okay, other business. Yes, Mr. Duran, before other business.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, if it's okay with you, I would like to send the committee members a packet of the rules and regulations in the direction that we received from HUD, because it is still very clear to me that the economic stimulus funds, there's a very strong inference that HUD expects the funds to be used for public infrastructure projects. And I want you guys to see that. I want you guys to read that.
I would like to see the the official rules, and I would also recommend that you communicate with your local HUD department. And
we have been communicating with our local reps.
Oh, just in order to change what's written on the website.
They're also receiving direction from Washington. It's possible that what you read was very early in the development, the publication, and since then, HUD's given different interpretations of what was intended, and that's possible. But we'll try to get more information to clarify it because it's important to
sure.
be as clear as possible.
Sure. Thank you. Other business? Mr. Sinanian.
Never mind. Sorry.
I have one, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Rojar didn't mention it, but New Horizons is having a little fundraiser for a pizza outing. It's on June 25th at the Shakey's there on South Glendale Avenue, just below Chevy Chase. So I'd like to invite all of them, and I'm quite sure Dr. Rochard will be there, so you can see her as well. And so you're going to have a good time and good pizza.
Very good.
June 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Any other business? Public communications? I do not have any cards in front of me.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, I'll move for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.